Radhe. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chaksuram Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Panchakalpa Tarubhyascha Vasindubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So we have been discussing in these evening classes qualities of Srila Prabhupada that I feel we should emulate, we should follow. And also qualities that Prabhupada had that made him such an amazing leader. And today was one of those days where I had no time to think. So I have to think now. So there's two ways. I have some idea what we could talk about, but also maybe some of you or one of you has an idea of a quality of Prabhupada that we could talk about. So I'll wait, see if any of you would like me to talk about a specific quality that Prabhupada had. I think we talked about it, no? Yeah, flexibility. But we can talk more. Yes, let's see.
I remember you once asked the question, what's the greatest thing Prabhupada left behind? And everyone was answering the question or answering like Bhagavatam, Father Starman.
And what did I say?
You answered his love and compassion for his disciples.
Oh, wow.
Because he knew everything about everyone.
His love and compassion for his disciples. That's a nice topic. You had a topic? Krishna Priya, you had a topic? Same. The flexibility we talked about. I mean, maybe we could talk about both. When you're flexible, you also have to be strict, because if you're too flexible, you get off and you don't remember where you left from. So there has to be a balance. And when you're grounded in strictness and you're broad-minded, and you can be liberal, because your liberality is able to incorporate more people and accept people where they're at. And the strictness is to maintain the purity of the process. So you really need both, right? If you have one or the other, only strict, you lose people. Only liberal, you give up, you water down your strictness. So in some ways, Prabhupada was unpredictable in how he would deal with situations. He was sometimes very strict and sometimes very liberal, as he would judge the situation. But my experience is that we can incorporate both these ideas, because Prabhupada was liberal. It was because of his love and compassion, because he wanted to see people become Krishna conscious, and he knew if he was too strict with this person, they could leave. So his openness was a manifestation of his compassion. And so even though the Shastra may say something, if he saw that following that could be adjusted in a way that the principle would be kept and it would engage and bring more people to Krishna consciousness. So sometimes we have to look at the adjustments Prabhupada made in terms, not of adjustments, but in terms of compassion. In terms of how this adjustment would bring more people to Krishna consciousness. And that how he often gave that a higher priority. So he would be willing to change things. Of course, I'm generalizing, but he would be willing to change things if it brought more people to Krishna. And so that was a big consideration. Sometimes he wouldn't change something. Sometimes we would say, we think this would help. And he would say, I don't think it will help. Don't change it. So that was a consideration. He wouldn't change it just because he thought people liked it. Maybe they like it, but it won't help them become Krishna conscious. Right? So sometimes we think, well, if we do this, people will like it. So they like it, but it doesn't mean they like Krishna. It just means they like that. So Prabhupada would judge that way also. Okay, people will like it, but they also like other things that are very tamasic. But would it actually help them become Krishna conscious? Then he would do it. So you can extend the idea of love and compassion for his disciples. You can extend that to other people. I think for Prabhupada, one of his transcendental anxieties was that the world was not Krishna conscious and people were being cheated in educational institutions. Politicians were cheating them. And I think that was a great anxiety for him. And you see how hard Prabhupada worked. And that was the force behind it. That he had firm faith that Krishna consciousness could solve problems and that nobody else could solve them. They could solve little portions of the problem, but not at the root, and so that pushed Prabhupada. You know, I told this story before, it's quite interesting. The devotees were taking a morning walk, it must have been around 6:30. And the park was near downtown, and people would park around that park, keep going, give up his sleep. He really saw his vision. He saw his vision. He had the vision that every living entity should become Krishna conscious. That's what he was trying to do. Of course, he knew that in Kali Yuga that wouldn't happen, but still, you ever have a vision and you know it's not going to happen, but you can't give it up because the vision is so beautiful? So, if you see the different things Prabhupada said, they seem contradictory. You know, every town and village, Krishna conscious taking over the world. On the other hand, it said, no, it won't take over the world. People aren't that intelligent. They're always demoniac people. You had these contradictory ideas. So definitely we could see that that was Prabhupada's vision, how to make everyone Krishna conscious. And then when he talked about Varnashram, he was talking about re-socialization of society. He talked about various systems of governance that would be beneficial to people. So he was thinking about how people are suffering under the leadership of modern day politicians, and he wanted to change that. He felt really bad. Sometimes Prabhupada used the word innocent people. Of course, that sounds strange to say innocent people, and in the same breath you talk about karma. But he used that word. That's a whole other subject. But at least when he used the word innocent in relationship to corruption in the political sphere, he meant that corrupt politicians are causing suffering to people that don't deserve it. It's like their karma is they're in a country. Their karma is they elected this leader, in a sense. But it's interesting he used the word innocent, like they don't deserve to suffer like this. Like we see cows being taken to slaughterhouse, we want to stop it. So Prabhupada kind of was seeing human society going to the slaughterhouse. And good government would save it, would stop it, it would change it. And without good government, then innocent people would suffer. So you could... he was always pushing us really hard. And I don't think he could stop pushing us that hard because he was thinking of the whole world. And we were opening so many temples so quickly. Like in America, I don't know how many temples have opened since Prabhupada left, but I don't think that many. Maybe 5, maybe 10, maybe one or two preaching centers closed. But in those days, we went from 0 to 108, basically, in 6 years. So then, it's something, not fantastic, and it was really basically in about 3 years, most of them. And most of them probably, someone could look through the BTGs and see when they were opening, because I think, 73, 74, those were the years most of them opened. So it wasn't even a full 6 years. So, as you know, Prabhupada would travel, and when asked why you're traveling so much, he would say, to make sure my disciples are strong. There's a letter, I don't know if you know this, but Prabhupada had traveled, I think to Australia, maybe from India. I'm going to Australia in a few days, and I looked at the flight time, it's like 17 hours, which is even longer than America. Of course, going to Argentina is probably like 21 or something, but I'm used to going to America. You can fly like Delhi, New York in 13, I think. Of course, you have to get to Delhi. So this is pretty far, and you stop in Singapore a few hours, and then you get another flight. Who knows what time it is in the middle of the night? It's difficult. So Prabhupada in this letter said, I can't travel like this anymore. It's too hard on me. So any of you who have traveled here to India from far away, you know how hard it is, and that's just one flight, and now you're here for a month or two. Well, to speak of you doing that every week, you could imagine how difficult. No, I don't know if you could imagine. It's really hard, and I've done it myself, so I can speak from experience. You may remember one year I had some heart problems, and I think it was because I was traveling so much. My body just kind of couldn't handle it. It was always... seriously, I don't know what happened to Prabhupada, but seriously, if I stayed somewhere a week, on the day I finally recuperated, and I'd be tired for the whole week, you could see some videos, I'm just yawning, my eyes are red, and I'd finally recuperate, and then I'd leave. That day I recuperate to go through 8-hour time zone to repeat the same thing. Oh, it's really difficult. Of course, I'm not Prabhupada, I'm not transcendental, but still, eventually Prabhupada found it difficult. So he was doing something difficult that really wears your body out. And when asked why, he said, to make sure my disciples are strong. So he was doing it for his disciples. He wasn't foremost doing it to preach. That was organized when he got there. Prabhupada loved to preach, share Krishna consciousness. And also his preaching was training us, because he would always have disciples in the room when he was preaching. He would always have a lot, because he wanted them to listen. He wanted them to learn what he was doing, what he was saying, how he was dealing with people. So definitely that was going on, the preaching, but most of the preaching really was done by his disciples. He did big preaching programs in India, but if you look at the quantity of preaching, of course, Prabhupada's books was doing the preaching, but in terms of man hours on the front lines, it was mostly disciples. Thousands of disciples in colleges, on the streets, Harinam. So Prabhupada was primarily going for the disciples. And I tell this story, it's interesting. Let me tell you what it was like to see Prabhupada for many of us. For many of us, it was like we just had to see Prabhupada once a year, even for 1 minute, and that charged our batteries for the year. Even we didn't hear a class, it's just we saw him. I go, I'm good. I'm good for the next year. For many devotees, it was like that. In fact, for many devotees, when Prabhupada came to the temple, they stayed at the airport distributing books, because they saw Prabhupada and they said, okay, I'm good. And they didn't hang around at the temple. Maybe Prabhupada would go out and they could see him or get an invitation to his room. They would go out on book distribution. So seeing Prabhupada was like okay, I've got my injection. I'm good for the year. And I think Prabhupada understood that. Of course, he came to preach to us. But I think he understood also that the association of a pure devotee is extremely valuable. And there's your spiritual master. This is the person you're dedicating everything to. So just to see him for a minute is amazing. Amazing. Amazingly powerful. I've told a lot of these stories I've told, but I think most of you haven't heard. Prabhupada, what I saw, a lot of what he did was shower affection on disciples. And we read during the initiation that the Guru should chastise, not, what did Prabhupada use the word? Pat? I think he used the word pat. Not pat the disciple, but chastise. He said that's the duty of the Guru. But if you actually calculated Prabhupada's patting and chastisement, patting on the back, very good, was common. Chastising was not common. So I think Prabhupada understood that most of us needed patting, not chastising. I mean, he would chastise sometimes, as necessary, of course. But if you speak to Prabhupada's disciples and say, what is your memory of Prabhupada? Was it chastising or patting? I think most of them would say patting. I mean, maybe a few who were with his personal entourage got the chastisement. But even then, not so much. So, in 1970, in Los Angeles, we acquired a church. I think this was the first church in ISKCON. And that Prabhupada became the Western World Headquarters. And there was nothing much in India. So it was 1970, maybe in the spring, they acquired this temple. They had another temple, which I think may have been a rented building. I'm not sure if they owned it. It was a church, smaller church, and this is a bigger church. It's the present-day Los Angeles temple. And every morning, Prabhupada would go on his morning walk, usually to the beach, which was like about a 20-minute drive. And then he would come back, and he would greet the disciples, and everyone would line up, and everyone would have a flower. And so Prabhupada did this ritual. And if you watch the videos of Los Angeles sometime in the 70s, have you seen that video? Where he gets out of like a limousine or some Cadillac, he gets up, huge smile, glowing, it's LA, Los Angeles, very sunny. And all the disciples are lined up, Prabhupada comes and he bows down. So I don't think Prabhupada had any flowers. Or maybe someone gave him flowers, but he had flowers because people were giving flowers, and he'd get a flower, give a flower. Like I do in the morning, I'm just doing what Prabhupada did, just giving out flowers. So that gave a chance to each devotee every day to see Prabhupada get a flower, and Prabhupada was just so happy to see the devotee. So, things like that made a big difference for us. There's your spiritual master smiling at you, giving you a flower, just like a little thing like that, but it was a big thing. And Prabhupada understood that. And when Prabhupada smiled at you, you felt, I'm okay. Approval. Prabhupada smiled at me. That's approval. I'm okay. Everything's okay. Today, the day is fine. It's more than fine. You probably know the story when Prabhupada was in his last days, he wanted to go do parikrama in Govardhan. And the doctor said if he does parikrama in Govardhan, he'll either die, I think he said he'll die on the way, or definitely die during the parikrama. His body's not strong enough. And Prabhupada's saying, no, I want to do parikrama. So this is debate going on. Lokanath Maharaj arranged Prabhupada wanted to do parikrama on a bullock cart. And so Lokanath Maharaj arranged a bullock cart, and everyone's upset with him. Why are you arranging a bullock cart? Because Prabhupada will die if he goes in the bullock cart. But he said he wants to do it. I'm a disciple. I have to do it. No, he's going to die. So this big emotional scene is going on. And finally, some of the senior devotees they were falling apart, and they said, we can't do this, we'll kill Prabhupada. And then eventually everyone agreed, and then they went to Prabhupada, and they told him, and Prabhupada said, if it's putting you in anxiety, I won't go. And they said, Prabhupada, you're putting us through all this emotion, he said. And he said, I don't want to put you in anxiety. But at the same time, he said, but it's my duty as the Guru to draw the emotion out. So Prabhupada definitely drew the emotion. He knew how to create that relationship between Guru and disciple, where you just want to surrender and you get this reciprocation of love and affection. And he did it a lot. In around late 1971 or early 1972, around that, devotees were discovering how to distribute much larger quantities of books than they'd ever distributed before. And what's so interesting about this is that Prabhupada was reciprocating with this, and he was writing many letters to encourage them. And if you look at Prabhupada's letters, you'll see there are some letters about book distribution, but they're not so intense and they're not so frequent. And then at a certain point, 1971, 72, and especially 73, you'll see there's lots and lots of letters about book distribution. And they're deeper and deeper, going deeper about what it is and how important it is. Why was that? Because the devotees had discovered how to distribute books, and they were very inspired by it. And so Prabhupada could see that now, two things, they've discovered how to do it, and they want to be inspired. So Prabhupada started writing lots and lots of letters to book distributors, reciprocating with their efforts. And you'll find many, many amazing letters about book distribution of things Prabhupada never said before. Because there was no one to say it to, because no one was really doing it, or no one was that enthused about it. And now here's this whole group of devotees who are going out on Sankirtan for 12 hours a day. This was like a new thing in ISKCON. And they were so inspired by it. And now Prabhupada's writing letters just to, it's like your son or daughter goes to college and you're writing letters. So happy you're in college, this is so great. You're going to, be contributing to the world, you're just encouraging. So Prabhupada was quite an encourager. That's another quality. But his love and compassion and encouragement, they're all intertwined. You can't separate them. And as we had said a week or two ago, how Prabhupada used to write devotees and tell them that the service they're doing is the most important service. And like 6 different services in ISKCON were the most important service. And so Prabhupada was making each disciple believed that his service was the most important, because you could easily think, well, what I'm doing is not that important, maybe I should do something else. And he made us all feel, your service is most important. Like Jenny, she's watching, and we were talking the other day, and I was saying, the qualities, the skill set you have and the education you have, very few devotees have. And the need for what you do, she's a therapist, mental health professional, I said, the need for what you do within our movement is very, very high. So your position is very, very important. It's very special. You have the qualifications that are needed to help many devotees, which is true, right? And so by her hearing that, it's like, oh, okay, this is important, I need to do this. So that's what Prabhupada did. He made you feel important. There's one letter where a young woman just had a child, and she was a pujari, and she was telling Prabhupada, it's very difficult to do pujari work, because if you touch your child, you have to take a bath and change your clothes, because anything which comes from the inside of the body to the outside, such as, excrement, urine, blood, mucus, even tears, anything from the inside of the body is considered a contaminant. It contaminates you, and you can't go on the altar or go in the kitchen. So, you have a baby, and, they have diapers, and their clothes, there's food all over their clothes. You can't even eat in the clothes you wear and go on the altar, because when you eat, it's considered that your clothes don't become dirty, but they become contaminated because you've touched your mouth. And so she was finding it difficult to do her service, and Prabhupada said, your service is, your kid is your deity, that's your service, just focus on that. So you can see the value of that, because otherwise your mind is in many places. And when you think something's the most important, then you do it. Prabhupada told Hridaya Maharaj to go to university, continue your education. We need educated people. So Prabhupada would see what was most important. So how could many things be most important? Well, it's most important for you. And this is most important for you. So in that way, Prabhupada wasn't alienating people and generalizing, oh, one thing's most important, you have to do it. But he was seeing the talents of individual devotees and encouraging that, and not just making them feel bad that they couldn't do this, which they thought was more important. Yes? Yeah. And when you read Prabhupada's instructions or letters, you might get a different impression that Prabhupada's like funneling everyone in. And that may be true in a sense in temples and where there are brahmacharis, especially in book distribution, that everyone should do this. But the brahmacharis are like soldiers, they're foot soldiers, so it's understandable they're meant to go out. But it wasn't entirely like that. Those devotees who were capable of speaking in universities, Prabhupada encouraged. This is the most important work, to preach to the intelligent class. Students are intelligent. We need these people to become devotees. This is the most important work. Scientific preaching, most important work. The scientists are now misleading people. They're the enemies. They become the enemies of civilization, because many of these misleading scientists were misleading because they're atheists. So Prabhupada encouraged all his disciples who were scientists to work in explaining Krishna consciousness through science. And he said, that's the most important. Obviously for the scientists, the most important. Maybe it was 1971 or 72, I had attended the Rath Yatra ceremony, Rath Yatra festival. And I was the temple president. We had come from Vancouver to San Francisco. That is like 20 plus or 24-hour drive. It's like, 1,200 or 1,500 miles. It's a long drive. So when I was at Rath Yatra festival, then I got a message, there's going to be a temple president's meeting tonight in Prabhupada's room. So the whole day at Rath Yatra, I'm thinking, what's Prabhupada going to say? How's this meeting going to work? A temple president's meeting. This was like, corporate headquarters here. You're with the chairman of the board, the CEO, the creator of the company, and he's got all his presidents that are present at that festival coming. He's going to, have a meeting with them. So the whole day I'm thinking, what's this meeting going to... Not that I was afraid, I was happy, of course, to go there, but I'm thinking, what's the meeting going to be about? What are we going to do? Strategize, 18 days we'll take over the world. What is it, open a new temple every month somewhere, I was thinking on the practical level, like there's going to be some strategy, something, or some specific job description for a temple president, something practical. So we came into Prabhupada's room, we paid obeisances. Prabhupada had just finished prasadam. It was the evening after Rath Yatra. It just had, from what I remember, it was nuts and dried fruit. There may be other things. And as each of us came in, we got prasadam in our hand from Srila Prabhupada. Wow. Someone asked me, why are you still a devotee after all these years? All these problems that you've had to face internally and the movement had to face? Because I got prasadam in my hand from Srila Prabhupada. What else? What other reason? So then Prabhupada starts talking about preaching, about how we should be opening temples. Because in those days, 71, 72, the emphasis was foremost on opening temples, even more than on book distribution and making devotees. Prabhupada wanted to open temples everywhere around the world. He wanted to establish ISKCON before he left as an international society, and he wanted temples everywhere. So he was talking to us about opening temples and asking different devotees, where are you going next? What temple are you opening? What have you done? And basically, the meeting was Prabhupada inspiring us to preach. That's what the meeting, there was nothing practical discussed. I mean, maybe, for a minute, where are you going? Prabhupada, we're going to go to Austin. Oh, very good. There was no here's the list. Next year you open 3 temples here. It wasn't like that. Here's, okay, what have you been doing? Let's see the accounts. What about this and that? None of that. He was just inspiring us, enthusing us. So that was one of the main services, I think, that Prabhupada had for his disciples, was the enthuser. You're having a temple president's meeting, and what is the CEO doing? He's preaching to you about preaching. That's the meeting. And that's the best meeting, right? Now we come out of that meeting very enthused. What's the use of a great strategy if you're not enthused, right? And if you're super enthused, maybe you can actually produce even without a strategy. The strategy will manifest. But of course, we should have strategy. I'm not undermining that. But that was Prabhupada's focus on enthusing us. So Prabhupada was this great enthuser, patting on the back, encouraging, and then inspiring us to go out, open temples, make devotees, distribute books. So sometimes devotees say, well, why were you so enthused in Prabhupada's presence? But one of the things that Prabhupada did, and this continued long after Prabhupada left, at least maybe the first 10 years, I noticed it was much more common than it is today. Prabhupada preached about preaching. And his disciples preached about preaching. They talked about how we have to, or the consciousness of the preacher, and we would try to inspire devotees to be more compassionate, to be more broad-minded and like that. So that was like, you could say the disciplic succession from Prabhupada was be the ultimate enthuser. And because if you have a movement of enthused people, they're pretty hard to stop. And definitely people tried to stop us all the time, but they couldn't. Another aspect of Prabhupada's enthusiasm is that he never became discouraged. You could imagine that we sometimes became discouraged. There were court cases against us. There were articles in the newspaper that were occult, that were brainwashing people. People would see us in public after reading those articles and scream at us and tell people not to buy our books. It was difficult. There was a period of time where there were so many bad newspaper articles. if someone heard the word Hare Krishna, and they found out, if someone found out you were a devotee, you wouldn't want them to know, because there was such bad public relationships. It was public relations. It was at a time when there were many new religious movements, and there were lots of problems in these new movements, and so all the new movements were put together in one big lump, and everybody was very suspicious and very negative towards him. So we were being taken to court for different reasons. And in the worst situations, Prabhupada was unwavering. It was like he already knew the storm would pass. Don't worry, just a few waves. And we're like, no, it looks like tidal waves ahead. No. Don't worry. You may remember that story, Shama Sundar. Before he was a devotee, he was arrested for selling drugs. And then he became a devotee, and then the court date came up after a devotee, and he left to go to court and said, Prabhupada, I may have to go to jail for a few months. He said, why? And he said, well, I was a drug dealer. And Prabhupada said, so was I, because Prabhupada had a pharmacy. I was also a drug dealer. And so, I forget the details of the conversation, but Prabhupada wasn't like, oh no. He said, don't worry, Krishna was born in jail. And it was very positive, and he said, you will get out very soon. Don't worry, you'll get out very soon. And he said this to a lot of devotees. And when the devotees were arrested on Sankirtan, he said, well, it's okay, you can just do Sankirtan in jail. It was like there was always this force behind you. It was like, okay, whatever situation, you can chant in jail, it's no problem. We were in Vancouver, we were eventually stopped by the police because of the complaints of the stores, because we would chant in front of one store for hours, then another store for hours. So the police came and said, you're making too much noise. So we wrote Prabhupada and said, what to do, we can't go on the street and chant. He said, well, just go out and clap your hands. Then you won't make any noise. It wasn't like, okay, defeated, close the temple, can't chant on the street in Vancouver, what's the use of being here? It was never like that. It was always this way or this way or this way. So one time, this is quite interesting, there was a case against us. I forget, it might have been a case where we were charged of brainwashing, because that did happen. I think this was the brainwashing case. The idea of brainwashing is you speak to someone and then you get them to move in the temple, supposedly against their will, and by all your tactics, they can't think anymore. So you've overtaken their will, they can't think, and they just, serve the guru and go on the street, collect money for the guru, and the guru lives in a mansion in Beverly Hills and drives a Rolls Royce. I mean, that was their idea, right? Because otherwise, why would intelligent young people drop out of university and go on the street all day and sell books when they could become doctors, lawyers, and whatever, right? So that's what people thought. If you want to understand this, there's a television interview with a deprogrammer called Ted Patrick and Rida Nandaraj and Balavanta Prabhu, and you can Google that. I think there's a Krishna Tube. There's a YouTube, there's a krishnatube.com, and that's on there. And you can see all the accusations, the guru, he lives up in the mansion, he doesn't shave his head. He's a black man. He don't wear the bald head. He don't wear the bald head. They make these guys go out in the street. They were the leaders at that time. That Prabhupada had already left. So this was the impression. There's some guru somewhere with a lot of money, and all these poor brainwashed people who can't think for themselves are on the street collecting all this money for the guru. So this came to Prabhupada in Mayapur, and they had to discuss with Prabhupada the strategy. What are we going to do? And they're saying, Prabhupada, they say this, they say that, and say, Prabhupada, we're brainwashing, and then Prabhupada would say, well, first you need a brain before you can wash it. It was like, He said, your brain is full of cow dung. It needs washing. So it wasn't like Prabhupada, like, oh my God, what are we going to do? This is going in the Supreme Court. We might not be recognized as a religion. It's the end of ISKCON, all my hard work. That was not the mood at all. It was just, they would give the arguments, Prabhupada, they say this, and then Prabhupada would give his arguments. No, your brain needs washing. Definitely needs washing. And just like Prabhupada having fun, like fighting and having fun. So then Prabhupada said something amazing. He said, it was like Prabhupada knew all these. It's like he knew that nothing can stop the movement. That's the undercurrent of everything that was going on. It's like Prabhupada just knew nothing's going to stop it. Don't worry, it'll keep going on. So that's what was behind us. So then Prabhupada said, we have to prove that we're bona fide. So the way we're going to prove that is your testimony is going to be the Bhagavatam. So just read the Bhagavatam. Chapter 1, verse 1. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudeva Janmaryasya. Read the verse, read the purport, go on, read the next verse, read the next. That was Prabhupada's plan. Just read the Bhagavatam. Interesting. He said, you just read the Bhagavatam and we'll win the court case. And guess who won the court case? Not only did we win, but the Supreme Court, or maybe it was the Supreme Court in New York, declared we're a bona fide religious movement. That was that was it. It was over. Nobody could accuse us. And as I said, Prabhupada, it was like, he knew that, and we're like, okay, just go to court and read. That's all we have to do, read the books? Yeah, just read the books, you'll win the case. It was like that. So, we never saw, we saw Prabhupada concerned if we made mistakes, that we don't repeat the mistakes and so forth. But we never saw Prabhupada show any signs of, okay, it's over. Close the temple, sell the properties. I'm moving back to India, it's hopeless. In the early days, he personally felt, he didn't know, he was doubtful. But once the movement started, Prabhupada was making lots of predictions, so he was encouraging us with his predictions. So at one time, in the early days of the movement, you need some context. No temples had money. No temples could pay their bills. Every temple was in debt. You imagine, a whole organization, every temple in debt. We had a Spiritual Sky incense company, and every temple owed Spiritual Sky money. They'd sell the incense, pay the bills, and there was no money left to pay for the incense. Every temple. And at one point, Spiritual Sky had to absolve every temple of their debt because they couldn't get the money. It was that poor. And then they said, okay, now you pay in advance. But before that, we didn't have money. There was just no money. And Prabhupada said, this is 1970. 1970. Vancouver Temple is an industrial building, a 3-room industrial building. We're not supposed to live there. Seattle Temple, a 3-bedroom house. Portland, Oregon, 3-bedroom house. San Francisco, a storefront big enough for, 60 people. San Jose, a 3-bedroom house. Santa Barbara, maybe a 1-bedroom house, 1-bedroom apartment. Los Angeles was a church, but that was separate. Laguna Beach, a 3-4-bedroom house. San Diego, 3-4-bedroom house. Just little houses with 4, 5, 6 devotees. And no money. And Prabhupada saying, very soon we will be rich. And by 1974, 75, Montreal church, Toronto church, Vancouver, 20 acres property with 6 houses on it. San Francisco bought a mortuary, but France, Europe, just chateaus, mansions, just, and 3 years before that, trying to pay bills, living in a little house, crowded in a little house. So, wouldn't that be nice? You see what's going on in ISKCON, and then Prabhupada says, don't worry, very soon this will happen. And it was almost like, well, because Prabhupada said it would happen, it's kind of like we made it happen. So we had this ultimate encourager behind us who never got discouraged no matter what happened. And simultaneously, he's telling us, if you chant Hare Krishna and follow the four principles, you'll see Krishna in this lifetime. So you have these two tracks. The world's going to become Krishna conscious, and you're going to see Krishna. All right, that sounds pretty good. Sign me up. Right? Sound good? You want to join? Sign me up for the program. I'll join a movement that's going to change the world, and at the end of my life, I'll get to see Krishna and dance with him. Sounds good to me. Where do I sign? How much does it cost? Nothing. Just come as you are, and we'll train you. And we'll give you a place to live, and all you want to eat, and just do service. Sounds good. Now, imagine you're sitting in a Bhagavatam class with Srila Prabhupada. Maybe you were sitting, I don't know, but you can't remember. So try to imagine you're sitting in a Bhagavatam class with Srila Prabhupada. Just, another class, another day in your life, just another day in the temple, except that Prabhupada's in the temple, giving class. So it's kind of special. And he says, imagine you're sitting there and you hear him say, in this life, you will see Krishna, or you can see Krishna and you can dance with Krishna. How would you feel? Pretty encouraged, right? Coming from a pure devotee who's seeing Krishna, and he's telling you, you can see Krishna. Now, let's put that in perspective, because the premise of these classes is that we want to learn from Prabhupada to emulate the qualities he has, so we can not be Prabhupada, but learn how to be leaders ourselves. We're all leaders on some level. Do you have that faith that in this life you can see Krishna? Do you have that faith that everything will get better? Things will grow and expand? Maybe not. But if you want to be a leader and you have that faith, you know what happens? The people under you have that faith. And you know what happens? We all have a vision. And you know what happens when you have a vision? It starts to manifest. Right? Like, Prabhupada had a vision, and we were just like, we were seeing it. I don't know if I told you, but if you asked any devotee, especially, maybe not any devotee, but most devotees, but especially Sankirtan devotees, if you just walked up to any Sankirtan devotee in like 1975 and said, what are you doing? What are you doing out here on the street? What are you doing at the airport? Oh, changing the world. We're creating a revolution. Every devotee, not where they just say that, that's how they felt. That's what we're doing. You know the story about the bricklayers building a cathedral? You know that story in Europe, maybe I think it took place in the 1600s, there were bricklayers building a cathedral. So one man came up to them and said, what are you doing? And one of the bricklayers was really unhappy and bored with his job. He said, I'm just laying bricks. Every day, brick on top of brick on top of brick. It's just so boring. Then he went up to another bricklayer and he said, what are you doing? He said, oh, we're building this amazing cathedral. This is going to be incredible. Like that. So what are you doing? I'm just giving out these books. Nobody reads them. I don't know why I'm doing it. No. What are you doing? I'm changing the world. These books will change the world. I'm meeting people. I'm giving them the Maha Mantra. This is going to change the world. So that was what Prabhupada did for us, because that was the reality he was living. And he gave us his reality. You're changing the world. You're going to see Krishna. So as a leader, we want to do that also. And when you give Of that reality, when you're encouraged and you have the vision and the faith, you can give that vision and faith to others. Yes? And you can be the ultimate encourager. Yes? Does that make sense? Now, I was once talking to Vaisheshika Prabhu, and we were discussing the job description of a guru. And there was some, is that water or coconut? Can you pour that in there? I mean, pour the water out? I mean, drink it or something? And then put that in there. We were discussing, I think there was a discussion like, what are the duties of a guru? So he asked me, I said, I felt my main duty was to encourage, enthuse and encourage. And he said, exactly, yes, I feel the same way. So not just for a guru, but for anyone who wants to help another devotee to encourage, inspire, and build faith. If you can do that, encourage, inspire, and build faith, then that devotee will do amazing service because they have you backing them. They may fall back, but you're always there. You have faith, you're inspired, you have a vision, and they'll always fall back on that faith, encouragement, and vision. Right? So that's what we're meant to come to that platform. Does that make sense? Yes. So, it's time for you to ask questions.
I have a question.
Okay.
You said that enthusing people and inspiring and keeping them. But is it not that after sometimes we have to become strong? We as a devotees, as a disciple, cannot hanging on our guru. I mean that he always will be.
Well, we're speaking from the point of view of leader, not disciple.
Okay.
So it's better to keep that mood. What you say may be true, but I think Prabhupada's vision was let me keep them going at top speed as long as I can, as long as I'm alive. Then, because when I go, I can't control it. So, but if I can do as much as I can when they're alive, that gives them the greatest chance. I can't control their choices. Of course, you can create structures and courses and mentoring and all that, and we should. But that's the impression I got. Prabhupada, he was just going. Give another world tour. Let's give him another chance. So both things. I think we need both things. We need inspiring leaders and.
Leadership, I believe, is the same because I see that people are expecting leaders to be strong and always inspire them, but after sometimes we have to be mature enough just to have this initiative. You know what I mean? That not always expect leader to tell us what to do, because we see it in many countries, like in Poland, people sometimes expect the GBC to come and tell them do this, do that, and but that's not the.
Well, that's not what Prabhupada did. He didn't tell them what to do. He inspired them in their spiritual lives. I think with the hope that it would go very deep and it would continue. But I think we should see it as an example. We don't want people to become dependent on us, so that if we don't inspire them, they can't function. But we could see it also from the position that Prabhupada was building faith, because if he builds faith, then after he leaves, people have deep faith, and then because of that faith, they'll continue.
But some couldn't function without him. When he left, they also left. So
But that he couldn't control.
They were over-dependent.
Not necessarily over-dependent. That could be, but also weak spiritually. But he did his best.
Yeah, I know.
And I mean, that was, I think Prabhupada's viewpoint was, I'm going to give it my best shot. We'll build faith. And Prabhupada knew, there was a very interesting conversation about Prabhupada giving sannyas and sannyasis falling down. And Prabhupada admitted that many of the people that he's giving sannyas to will fall down. But he said you need sannyasis, so he made them. In a preaching movement you need sannyasis, but many will fall down. So he was, I think Prabhupada was kind of like, okay, here's the philosophy, here's the mission, who wants to go forward? And whoever wants to go forward, I will enthuse, I will inspire, I will try to build faith, and let's see what happens. And some of you will make it, and maybe we'll have a few moons, and maybe we can't have more than a few moons. So what's happening now in ISKCON is we're more realistic about it. So we have, on one hand, we enthuse, and the other hand, we deal with all the weaknesses, and we create systems and education that will be to maintain them, and then we interfere if we see dysfunctional relationships with disciples who are overly dependent, who we know when their guru is not here, are going to be weak. So, but definitely to have this person behind a movement who would never go this way, would only go this way. You could imagine if he went this way, we would have been finished.
But what about, you have a Prabhupada who was like, and the feed
A what?
He was, no one defeated him. I mean, he never fall and didn't have doubts about him. But we were witnessing so many fall downs of the leaders. That's why our faith is very weak, and we are afraid to trust them. And
But so you trust Prabhupada.
but Prabhupada, he is present and he is not present.
Trust his books, his morning program, his vision for preaching. That's ultimately indefeatable. Of course, it's understandable if a guru falls. It's going to be devastating. But I'm not entirely sure. Oh, leaders, yeah. We had leaders fall during Prabhupada's time. It was difficult, but not devastating. It was just challenging. It was hard for us. But in one sense, I think for a lot of us, we became stronger when a big leader would fall. Like in our morning walks, we have to walk down a hill, and now the hill's wet and it's slippery. So I slipped. I was the first one down and I slipped. So I'm sure everyone was more careful because of my fall, wasn't it? Oh, I'm the one who's always like, I never fall, And then I slipped. So when someone slips and falls, a lot of times that makes you more careful. So, So those leaders, when they fell, it was difficult, but it didn't disrupt the flow of the movement. Things kept going because those who had faith just kept going. Yes?
You were talking about the word enthusiasm.
Yeah.
It's interesting that word comes from the Latin, God inside.
Yeah.
Inside us. So Prabhupada do that very nice. And on the other hand, was a wonderful leader, because a good leader makes other leaders.
Yes.
Don't try to put others down.
Yes.
To empower others, and that was what Prabhupada did.
Yes. Definitely. But empowerment requires detachment, because you don't control, and you let other people grow. We just had a devotee speaking. We had a meeting. There's an organization, I don't know if you know. 2 years ago, let me give you some history about ISKCON management. Not 2 years ago, maybe six years ago, the GBC, which is the ultimate managing authority for ISKCON, decided it would be good if all the sannyasis and all the GBC and all the gurus got together and met and discussed, got to know one another better, and also discussed issues that were important, especially issues of the future, like how the movement will go on. Because here's a room of gurus, GBCs, and sannyasis, and 10 or 20 years, that room's going to be fairly empty. So what's going to happen when they're gone? So that was created. And so 2 years ago they meet every other year, and 2 years ago they came up with an idea to create a group of devotees who would be checks and balances for the GBC. So the GBC would give them resolutions and they would look at their resolutions, because the temple presidents used to do that. And so now they're doing that. And now I forgot what I was saying. What was the last thing? What was I responding to? What? Empower, yeah. So one younger member, an invited guest came, and he felt that we're not empowering enough the younger generation. And in our group, there's only 2 young people, and they're mostly 50s and a lot over 60. So, and look what Prabhupada was dealing with, 20-year-olds. He's like, okay, go. Here's a zone, you're in charge of 6 temples, and he's 22 years old, and you just took your diapers off like a few years ago. And now so it requires some level of detachment, and it also requires trust in that devotee, that they're sincere, and that even if they make a mistake, they'll learn through their sincerity. So that definitely was the way Prabhupada empowered us. It's like, okay, you do it. It wasn't. We weren't puppets. It was like, you do it. Use your intelligence. And I think that was one of the keys to the success of our movement, giving people that freedom to make mistakes. A little bit of freedom. It's monitored. There was GBC, but. Still freedom, give it a try, see what you can do. So that's important. But I've always felt the detachment it's dependent on empowerment is dependent on detachment. Otherwise you want to control people, and then it stifles their creativity.
Even if you see the job description of the GDC also said that.
Empower.
Their duty is not to control or micromanagement. The zone is empower.
Yeah. So in our meeting in the Sabha, we had discussed that probably nobody even knows what we are and what we're doing, and that we should tell everyone. So I'm just telling you, there's a group, very nice group. We met for 3 days, and very cohesive group. We don't all agree on everything, but we're all very close and open and understanding, and so we had lots of nice discussions, and we worked very well together. Divya is on that, and there were about 24 people here this year. It was originally started with 35. Some dropped out, and some couldn't come to India. And if you have any concerns, we can bring them up to the GBC. So we're kind of like your interface to the GBC, which is important. So if you have concerns... What's that? No GBCs, no. They were taken from different areas of the world, a certain number of sannyasis, a certain number of young people, some temple presidents, and no GBC. So at this meeting, we had discussed that, who has access to the GBC? And even if you have access to GBC, sometimes they're so busy, they can't really, they may have more important things to do than follow through on something you have. So anyone who's a member of Sabha, I don't know if you know all the members, but you know me. So anyone who's a member of the Sabha, I think for most of you here it would just be names. I don't know if you know them. Sannyasis you would maybe know. Bhakti Dhiro Damodar Swami, Bhakti Prabhupada Vrata Damodar Swami, Bhakti Sagar. What's his name? Bhakti Rasayana Sagar Maharaj, Bhakti Atmanivedana Maharaj, Bhakti Ananya Keshava Maharaj from Russia. Is that his name? Russian. What's his? Ananda, Krishna, Keshava. Yeah, yeah. Keshava is the last name. Keshava Swami, yeah. Rukmini, who's the mother of Gauravani. Who else would they know? Drutakarma, you probably know. Sureshwar, who does the Prabhupada course on Prabhupada, founder Acharya. Yeah. Sri Radha Govinda was there, yeah. Anyway, so if you have any concerns that you would like to bring to the GBC, you can bring them to the Sabha members, and then in the course of time they can bring it up and discuss it. So then that way you have an access. We can't guarantee GBC will do anything or even listen because it's, that's just life in the real world. But at least we can we can't even guarantee the Sabha would even want to bring it up, but the Sabha would discuss it. If you have a concern, the Sabha would discuss it. So that was a side point. Yes?
Guru Maharaj, are we changing the world? Because we are in Kali Yuga, and I understand that this is a special Kali Yuga because the Lord Chaitanya came and because Prabhupada wants, and because he made the prediction that all the world is going to chant Hare Krishna. Are we going to change the world, or what's going to happen with Kali Yuga? Do we have to...
Kali Yuga is going to come, destroy us. We're going to fall into Maya, and this guy will be destroyed. Any other questions? And if anyone tells you that, well, no. When Prabhupada was asked this question, he gave the best answer. And the best answer, which he gave, was, it depends on you. You can't have a movement of people who aren't Krishna conscious and expect to make the world Krishna conscious. Right? So that was Prabhupada's answer. Well, it depends on you. Because, how, like we were saying in class yesterday, 2 days ago, or 3 days ago, the success of the Krishna consciousness movement depends on the success of the individuals in their spiritual lives. So if we're Krishna conscious, you can't help but be Krishna conscious. It's impossible not to be Krishna conscious. It's impossible for the world not to get Krishna consciousness if we're all Krishna conscious. And it's impossible for the world to get Krishna consciousness if we're not Krishna conscious. Right? Does that make sense? So, if you look at it that way, I don't want to make you feel bad, but there's a huge burden on us. Because, there's Buddhists are helping people in certain ways, Christians are helping people in certain ways. But it's limited. Most of the religious organizations quite limited in the power they have. But the Maha Mantra and Prasadam is so powerful. Not that we're so powerful, but we have powerful weapons. So, one guy with a nuclear weapon, he can defeat a country. Right? So Maha Mantra is like, it's like a nuclear weapon compared to other practice, compared to Buddhist meditation where you're just breathing, pranayama, letting your emotions out. That helps people mentally, but as far as liberating people and changing the world to God consciousness, that won't do it. And Christians, their religion's based on it's not based on meat eating, but pretty much, they're not so keen on following the four regulative principles. Maybe meat eating, maybe intoxication, maybe not. So, the answer to your question, Krishna Priya, is if Krishna Priya becomes Krishna conscious, the world will become Krishna conscious. And everyone has to think. Everyone has to think. It's not that I can depend on another devotee. Everyone has to think. If I become Krishna conscious, then the world can become Krishna conscious. We tend to think, well, I'm not going to be Krishna conscious, but I'm depending on you to be Krishna conscious, and then the world will be Krishna conscious. No, we can't think that way. Sorry for the bad news.
It was a good news.
If you think one devotee is going to do it, and you can just sit and eat your pakoras and watch the world surrender to Krishna. Not exactly. So KKGPDD has a question.
It's more like a comment. I was watching a video today, not from devotees, but
Oh my God! You watched a video? It wasn't from devotees? We're going to have a meeting about that.
I was thinking that this reminded of something that you were saying about the 1% of people being Krishna consciousness will change the world.
Yes.
And this person was telling about the how do you change in your vibration and energy, and how this affects people around you. And she has like a scale. On the bottom is like anger and fear, and this like low
Yeah.
energy.
Yes.
They affect people like around you, but when you have like love and enlightenment on the top, like when a person is really enlightened, you can affect 7 million people.
Yeah, we did an event. There were 500 people there, and I had those figures, and I was telling the people, I said, do you realize in this room how many people we affect in our lives? In 70 years, you affect so many people, like a day. I forget, so we calculated, we were going to affect 70, huge part of the world, just us. It's very interesting. I have it somewhere on my phone, a figure of how many people you affect in a lifetime, approximately. Interesting, huh? And it's a very good way to encourage people to chant, because you can affect, or become Krishna conscious, you can affect so many people. Yes? Anyone else raised their hand before? Stephanie?
How can we develop that kind of compassion that
Oh.
awake ourselves the anxiety to preach or to share
Yeah.
Krishna consciousness?
How to develop compassion. What else are you going to do once you're a devotee? That's one way of looking at it, right? Now you're a devotee. Devotee means compassionate. Devotee means, you see, when you're a Brahmin, and all of you are Brahmins or Brahmins in making, when you're a Brahmin, you're given knowledge. And the obligation of a Brahmin who receives knowledge is to give it. And if he doesn't give the knowledge, then that knowledge dries up. He can't use it. He has to give it. That's the qualification of a Brahmin. So it's kind of like compassion is the job description of a devotee, or the fundamental nature of a devotee. But then you might say, I don't feel compassionate. Is that what you were going to say? How do I actually get it? Well, it's interesting. How could someone who comes to the temple and says, I really like this, can I stay overnight? And they stay overnight, and they never leave. And then, they're on the street the next day with the Harinam party because the whole temple goes out. Hey, would you like to give out some magazines? Yeah. Like, how compassionate are they? Really? So, part of that compassion is it's built into the structure of the movement. And so if you're just part of the movement, you kind of go along with it. You manifest compassion. It's just the way ISKCON goes. It's a movement of compassion. And if you work cooperatively with it, you're kind of forced to be compassionate. Oh, it's a Sunday feast, people are coming, clean the temple. Okay, you're going to greet them, and you're going to seat them, and you're going to cook for them, and you're going to sing for them, and you're going to speak to them. So you're forced to be selfless. This Sunday afternoon, I like to be at the beach. No, we're cleaning the temple all day. You have to get ready. You know what we used to do in the old days? On Sunday, we would shave our heads and iron our dhotis and clean the temple. That was getting ready for the guests. So it was all about guests. Every day we go out and chant. It was all about the people on the street. And then Sunday was all about the guests. It was just, the whole structure of ISKCON was nothing was about us. We slept on the floor. The floor, hard floor, no mat, nothing, just a sleeping bag. It wasn't about us. We lived in Canada. It snows in Canada. In Vancouver, even in Vancouver it snows. We lived in a building that was it was an industrial building. The heating was centrally controlled. We didn't turn on the heat or turn it off. The heat went off every night at 6. We weren't supposed to live there. It went on every night at 8. We lived in the winter in Vancouver in a building without heat, sleeping on the floor. How does that sound? You want to do that? So it was like, okay, this is what we do. We have to, help people. So it was just built into the structure and very essence of ISKCON. So just by being part of that, you start to develop it. And then Prabhupada would preach about it all the time. Like I was saying, he would preach about preaching. We have to save people, we have to help people, Vaishnavas are compassionate. So we're hearing this all the time, over and over again. So it's like, it starts to get in there. Oh, this is what I'm a devotee. This is what I'm supposed to do. I remember when I was first a devotee, I thought, this is so good, I don't have to go to college. And I'll never have to work again. This is like amazing, and I can sing all day, right? And then, you go to class, and it's like, you're hearing classes, and then they kind of get serious, you come with this like young person, wow, this is like one endless party. We're just chatting on the street and taking nice food. And now, I never had a brother, and I moved in the temple, I've got like 8 brothers. This is like, instantly, I got 8 brothers. Wow, this is like so good. And then, you go into class, you think everything is just one big party, and they start talking like, we have to, a mission, we have to save people, we can't be selfish. I'm like, ooh, I didn't know about that part. So you start hearing these things, because this is really what it's all about. There's a mission, we have to be selfless, the world needs us. So hearing that, and I'll give you an example. This is a beautiful example. You may know there's a hospital in Mumbai called Bhaktivedanta Hospital. And so they wanted me to do a course for the employees, doctors, nurses, on forgiveness. So it was supposed to start at 10, but a lot of the people were still working at 10. So we had an hour. So I thought, I don't want to start the course because then we'll be ahead and the other people will miss out. So I will just talk to you about forgiveness for an hour. And I was explaining how forgiveness is a quality of devotee. It's a sattvic quality. We should be living sattvic qualities. If we're living rajasic and tamasic qualities, it affects us and so forth. And those of you who have taken our forgiveness course know that we write our problem, our issue, on a piece of paper, and then when we feel like giving it up, we stand up and then we tear it up. And then we put it in a make-believe fire pit. I draw a fire on a bag. Then people come and throw their issue. And it's like, okay. When I was 17, my mother, this, that, and the next thing. I never forgot her. Now I'm 35. And through the course of doing exercises, I don't want to live with this anymore. Just let it go, and I throw it in. At this workshop, after that 1 hour talk, I would say 80% of the audience tore the paper up and came up. It was like, workshop over, we don't have to do anything. They were just getting up and tearing the paper. It's like, why is this happening? This never happened anywhere before. Actually, it happened once with non-devotees, like about 6 months ago in Mexico. But with devotees, that's unusual. Usually it takes time. You go through the processes. And I said, how is it that you all tore your paper up in the first hour and we didn't even do one exercise? I said, was my lecture that powerful? I was thinking, that's probably the most powerful lecture I've ever given on forgiveness. It's like in an hour, 80% of the audience, I could have been 100%, I can't remember. But you wouldn't believe me if I said 100. So we'll just say 80. Tore up their paper and let their forgiveness issue go. And it's like, how is that possible? So I said, how is it that you could do this? And they said, oh, Radhanath Swami, he's always preaching about forgiveness. So we were ready for it. So, especially during Prabhupada's time, this preaching about compassion, giving, serving, spreading the movement, we're hearing it like every week. We're hearing it. So how could you be selfish in an environment like that? Right? That's the idea. Does that make sense? It's our philosophy. Okay, so we're going to end class. Thank you all for listening. And now we're going to chant. We're going to do kirtan for 5 or 6 hours. And then we'll chant our rounds, and then we'll go on Mangalartik, and then we'll go on our walk. How's that sound?
Sounds
Yeah. Yeah, that'll take us to like 1 a.m. And
good. We
then...
did it yesterday. There was a Kaddish
Oh yeah, Kadasi, yeah.
all night long.
Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Premanandi.
Mahatma Prabhu ki
Krishna Stai Bhutale Shmati